everyone, and welcome to We Go Back. I'm your host, Bryan Abou Chacra, and on this week's episode, we will be reviewing Further Instruction and Every Man for Himself, the third and fourth episodes from Season 3 of Lost. We wake up with John in the jungle where he sees Desmond running around butt naked, but he cannot speak. And then out of the sky comes Echo's stick, who falls right in front of him. He picks it up, and then we very clearly and distinctly, because Lost always does this to show you something, see the inscription of "Lift your eyes up and look north." John 3:5. So that's going to be important. We'll pay attention to that. It's not going to come up yet, but I'll tell you when it does. So we have John now going back to the beach. He grabs tarps, takes them all over to the church area, and then Charlie goes over and meets him there, starts chastising him, giving him a hard time about being gone, not calling, not writing. Also gives him a hard time about what he's doing. And then, of course, in great Lost fashion, they bring up a hilarious little joke right there where he talks about trees being great conversationalists. And I love that they put a little bit of his Lord of the Rings pedigree into this show. Loved it. He spent a lot of time talking to the trees. If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, that's a whole nother podcast. We maybe we'll do a Lost Lord of the Rings mashup. We won't. That would be a bad idea. Anyway, we have Locke, who's trying to speak to the island. That's the whole purpose of what he's doing, and he needs Charlie to stand guard and make sure that nobody goes in. Now, this takes us into our first flashback, where Locke picks up a hitchhiker on the side of the road. We find out his name is Eddie, and he needed to get out of where he was. He's in a bad way. And the first time I watched this, I sincerely thought that this actor at first was the guy who played Merry, I think, or Pippin. I don't know. The other Hobbit that Dominic Monaghan wasn't. But, yeah, I thought it was him for like half a second. Eric told me it wasn't, and I was wrong. I looked it up and I was wrong. So they get pulled over and they get all searched up by this cop. And as he's talking, he's packing guns. Locke tells him he's got a whole bunch of guns and a bunch of books for all the registries and everything. And then the guy still wants to get him for hitchhiking. Like, is that seriously something that you can get a ticket for? Is hitchhiking not legal? I have no idea what state they're in. We have no clue. I didn't actually pay attention for once to the license plate. So email me, wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know if there were any license plates on his car, because I did not pay attention to him. The kid lies for him, and he tells him that he's his uncle. The guy sends him on their merry way. John, about to get ready, now back on the beach to go into the sweat lodge, tells Charlie not to come in, takes the same goop that he gave to Boone, and then enters the sweat lodge. As he's sitting there, suddenly Boone comes in, and we can see that John is very apologetic and sorry for what he did, but he can't speak. Boone already knows, says that he will speak when he has something worth saying, and then he takes him to a metaphorical airport where, something that was pointed out to me in one of our emails I hadn't paid attention to. Our good friend Joey emailed us this week and said that everyone in this vision that John is having is grouped as they currently are on the island, and not how they would have last been seen by John Locke in season 2. That's a very good point, because John is here trying to talk to the island, and this, through Boone, and in this vision, we're seeing the island talking to John in the same way that the island talked to Boone in season 1. So it's a really cool scene that we're seeing it, and Boone is back in this moment. Also, I'm pretty sure, again, it might have been ruined in the credits that he was going to be here in this episode, because I remember this was the first time a surprise was ruined like that. For me, that was big, and that was kind of a bummer to see his name down there. Anyways, we're in this metaphorical airport, and throughout this whole airport, there are sounds from all over the hatch inside of it. Beeps, tickers, buttons being pushed, the paddles going back. When John gets on the escalator and he's going up, you can faintly hear that chain running sound that the smoke monster has sometime, that kind of like click, 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 click sound. It's so well done with the sound there, and if you have surround sound, it's really, really awesome. But such a cool scene, and it's a really cool way to tell a story, and this vision really shows you a lot. And then we have John waking up in the sweat lodge again, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't necessarily know what to find in this dream, and then he gets up, and as he's getting up, he sees a polar bear jump through the fire, and Phantom Boone says that you have to clean up your mess, John. You have to save him. So we're very clearly now told what we're going to have to do, because he gets up out of the sweat lodge and tells Charlie that he is going to save Mr. Echo's life. That's cleaning up his mess, which is brought up later in a conversation between John and Charlie. So Charlie joins him on this expedition, and it's really interesting that I noticed this again. Charlie is never really doing much on his own or motivated by his own thing. He's always attached to some other character. Even I feel like when we're watching his backstories, he's always attached to a character in that backstory, either his brother or that girlfriend he had. In the beginning, it was him and Locke, and then it became him and Echo, and then it became him and Sawyer. Now it's him and Locke again, and it's like, okay, he always gets kind of dragged into things. Him and Shannon, he just gets dragged into things. He's never really doing anything that is motivated by his own desires. He's always just following somebody, and I hadn't picked up on that until this watch through. So they find Echo's cross in the jungle, and they continue to search, but Locke tells Charlie to go back because bad things happen to the people that are around him. They show up at this plantation that it's run by Mike and Jane, and I just want to highlight the first letter of each of those two names, and I wonder what they were hinting at the beginning of the episode, what this plantation might be. Because I don't know if you had it planted in your head, but the first thing I thought when they showed up there and there was a sweat lodge in the back, I'm like, this is a pot farm. It's got to be a pot farm. And the fact that it's Mike and Jan, not Jane, is really, really funny. The kid is wearing a Geronimo Jackson shirt. Really funny to see that come back up. And then he gets invited to dinner. John says grace and talks about how these people are his new family and that he is no longer angry anymore. So we see that John was actually able to, again, move past even Helen and find a place where he felt like he had a new family. And so that was a really big point I think they were trying to give you, that John, whenever he feels like he has a purpose, he's at ease with himself. And he's always chasing some sort of purpose. At first it was Anthony Cooper, and now it's this new family on the plantation. He feels at home here, and when he was on the island, he felt like he had a purpose when he was pushing the button and following what the island said, and he has to realize that he's off course, like Boone had mentioned in the vision. So it's really cool to see that he's constantly motivated when he feels like there is something that he is supposed to do, because that's what he always talks about, is what he's supposed to do. So we go back to the jungle. They return to the hatch site where it's completely imploded, and we see there's an active kill. So it now tells us that it's polar bears that have taken away Mr. Echo, and one happens to chase both Charlie and Locke, which leads them right into Hurley, who's returning from when everybody got abducted. And Hurley lets Charlie and Locke know what's going on and what's happened to the guys. And Hurley's really concerned about the polar bear that's left. He notices that neither of them seem to care, that they were just being chased by one. And I love this little bit of a joke. One thing that I did want to point out is Charlie's comment here about the high intelligence of polar bears. I really like that they continue to tie in that polar bears have a really smart thinking and like higher IQ than most other animals. We've now heard it from Tom when he was talking about how the polar bears figured out that contraption that Sawyer was doing, and now Charlie is bringing a little bit of science to it, letting us know that the polar bears might be a little more significant than just a random thing on the island. And that's one of the greatest things. Most things in Lost have a purpose for being there and a reason. We now go back to our flashback where Eddie makes a comment about a girl who passes by who's a lot younger than John. He says that, oh, you could kind of take advantage of being a daddy for that younger girl. And you can tell the whole daddy issue is something that Locke is very sensitive of, and it doesn't really appreciate it. I love that they always write these little nuances into characters, that things in their past affect them in their future, and, you know, for reasons that you wouldn't know otherwise. It kind of gives you an insight on, I think, people in general. Like, oh man, why didn't he like that comment? Oh, maybe something happened to him in his past that caused him to feel like, you know, maybe people could be sensitive about issues with the father. Who knows? But I think it's good because you get that facet of his character. He doesn't appreciate it. But Eddie gets down to the nitty gritty. Eddie down to the nitty gritty. Say that 5 times fast. Please don't. He knows what's going on, and he thinks that they're going to blow up something, and he wants in on it. And John says he will talk to Mike and Jan. We go back to the jungle where Locke is preparing to go in, and he tells Charlie that he can't be there. And I love that he keeps telling people what they can't do, that Charlie should go back. And Charlie obviously doesn't want to. He's there and he's invested, and he sticks around. And John gets suited up, goes in, and he's going to save Mr. Echo's life. Meanwhile, Hurley finds the naked Desmond who's been running around in the jungle, and we don't know where his clothes are, and that Desmond just woke up like that, which is going to bring up a whole lot of questions. Why is he the only one who's completely naked? I mean, I know he turned the key, but why would he be completely nude while everybody else woke up in the jungle with clothes? Or, I mean, Echo got dragged off by a polar bear, so I guess everybody got their own a la carte. But that's a really strange one, that he woke up naked. This takes us back to our flashbacks, where John goes into the greenhouse and Mike and Jan are frantically packing up. We find out Eddie is a cop and that his card obviously has the numbers on it. Just look for him everywhere. I'm not going to point them all out from now on unless they're super important, but they're everywhere. In the next episode, I'll point them out when we do Every Man for Himself. There's a discrepancy, so I'll talk about that when we get there. But John says that he can fix this problem and he will take care of the issue with Eddie being the cop. We go back to the caves. John is now searching and has found Echo in the caves. He fights off a polar bear and gets Echo out. Locke is a hunter. That's what they're talking about in the flashback. That's what they're seeing here. He came in there and he fought a polar bear. How many of y'all find? I could never. We go back to Hurley and Desmond, who are walking back to the beach, and Desmond tries to comfort Hurley by saying that, oh, don't worry about it. Locke's going to take care of it. He said so in his big speech on the beach. But he never said anything. He just said that he was going to go save Mr. Echo's life. What is Desmond talking about? We go back to Charlie and Locke in the jungle. They talk about what he saw and what cleaning your own mess meant. And I loved that Charlie really needed it spelled out to him here. He's just kind of like really aloof, a really interesting character now in the show, but really cool still. I always love his relief. His comic relief in the show is great. We return to the flashback. John has planned, I guess, to kill Eddie. He wants to shoot a cop to fix the problem of the plantation. Like, no, they should just book it. But he doesn't, and he asks if he was chose specifically. That's the most important thing for John here. And you can see that it's an issue with, the guy says, because he's amenable for coercion. And that kind of is a really big point that I think I want you to take away from this episode about Locke, is that this isn't just a con man trying to take advantage of his son. The police are taking advantage of Locke because he is amenable to coercion. He can be reasoned with to see a different point of view, that he will agree with you a lot more likely than most other people will. And that, I think, is a very clear point that we're seeing in John and in warnings that we've gotten from John when he went to go find his father. And he said that, some of these things aren't meant to be found. The private eye said this. And then Echo, why I keep saying that line is important. Echo says, do not mix coincidence for fate. And this is sort of like, hey, you don't just take any reason to agree with something. It might question it. It might need questioning. Be skeptical. And then he lets that kid go away. We go back to the jungle where Charlie goes to get water and leaves Echo and Locke alone. And Locke is able to apologize to Echo because he has a moment of clarity. Echo is absolutely lucid at this moment, and he tells John that he can still protect Jack, Kate, and Sawyer, and that John is a hunter, and that he can take care of everything. Let's go back to the beach where everyone finds out about what happened to Jack and the others, and Locke gives that speech that Desmond had talked about on the beach. And Hurley, now looking at Desmond, tells Charlie about a very big sense of deja vu, which is a really cool little nugget that they're starting to sneak in there on you. You're not going to even know. And this will take us into Every Man for Himself, where we open up to Desmond on the beach, thinking long and hard, very intently about something, and then just walks over to Claire for no reason and just, or what seems like no reason, but with a lot of intent, just offers to build her a better roof for her camp. She declines. Charlie comes up and he kind of steps in and shoos off Desmond, and he goes off. We now finally meet back up with Jack in the cell, who's getting food from Juliet while he's watching cartoons. And then Jack questions why Juliet is there and what her position is within her group, and kind of starting to play her relationship against Ben because he can sense that there's some dissent there. And so he's trying to do what Ben was doing. And that's really cool. We're getting to see Jack trying to do the same things as Ben, and we'll see how that pays off for him. But in the middle of all of this, Ben barges in with something very urgent. Everybody's on alert. It's a critical situation, and Sawyer is seeing that this is an opportunity for them to escape. He comes up with a plan and lays it all out for Kate. Really awesome plan. It actually might work, and it's really well thought out. So honestly, I feel like the intended response from people was to be like surprised that Sawyer could come up with such a great plan. But you got to think, one, we've already been established that he comes up with good plans in this first season. Two, you can't be a good con man without making good plans. So it's really not surprising that he can make a good escape plan and find ways out. So I think that's really cool that they will play on your expectation, because you think by his character type, he's not a smart guy, but he's obviously exemplified lots of bits of intelligence. So that's a really cool thing that we get to see him do, is have this really well thought out plan, and it actually does make sense. This takes us to our flashback where Sawyer is inmate number 805, which changes later in the episode to 840. I don't remember at what point. I just noticed that it changed halfway through the episode. We see that there is a fugitive dude who's in there because he embezzled some money. He walks up to him. Sawyer walks up to him. The guy has a number 248. So there are the numbers again. Those are the only other two times I'm really going to point them out, unless there's some sort of specific reason to talk about them. But Sawyer calls him Costanza, obviously referencing Seinfeld, which didn't pick up on the first time, but I got it this time. It's okay. 31 years old and I got it. So Sawyer lays out what's going to happen to this guy when he meets him in the laundry room. And it is a crooked warden in the prison, just like in Shawshank. Or was that? No, that was... No, Shawshank, yeah. Schindler's List is a totally different movie. But just like Shawshank, we have a crooked warden, and he's going to steal all the money. And then the warden comes in, and we see that he's a mean dude. He comes in, he's mean, he drops his apple on the ground. He's a mean dude, and he shows that he has it out for him. But we know what's really going on. We know what's really going on, what this warden and Sawyer are doing. We'll get to that in a little bit, but that's a long con if I've ever seen one. Anyway, we have Ben, who comes out and sees the vitals on Sawyer when we get back into the cages. And then Sawyer sees his opportunity and tries to lay his trap, but gets knocked out instead. And then as he's coming to on a stretcher, Tom is talking about how their comms have been down and that they haven't been able to reach the outside in a few days, which is bizarre. What are they talking about? I love that Lost will put these little things in there that make you want to go, wait, what? What are you talking about? That I think is good mystery writing. It makes you wonder what they're talking about without making it such a big deal that it sidetracks everything, and it gets you to think. It's audible. It's obviously there for you to hear, and you just need to pay attention. So they are going to stick Sawyer with a needle just like in Pulp Fiction, and they do the whole reference, and I love that Lost is not above it. That a show with millions of dollars for budget, a TV show, the first TV show in a long time, that set up this whole TV sort of empire that we have with all these big shows. They had a huge $1 million budget, and they decided to reference Pulp Fiction in the middle of it. This episode, I think, has two references, and I'll point the other one out when I get to it. So we return to the beach where this guy, Paolo, who we've now heard in 2 episodes, you heard him in the last one, you heard his name, and it's Paolo playing golf on the beach. Desmond borrows a 5-iron and then gives him golf advice. Love that a Scotsman gave a totally different dude some golf advice. Really hilarious. I love it. But who the hell is this guy, and why are we featuring any time on him when we've never seen him before? This is one of the issues that the beginning of Lost had in season 3. This random guy. We'll talk more about him as the season goes on. Sawyer wakes up again, and Ben brings in a rabbit with a number 8 on it. Oop, I lied. I forgot I wrote that down because I decided in this episode as I was reading it that I was going to stop pointing him out. But it has an 8 on it. And it says that his heart is hooked up to a pacemaker. He shows him how this little bunny rabbit will explode. His heart will explode because his heart rate went up. And that's what they're going to do to him if he tries to escape. And Sawyer will behave now, or they'll put one on Kate too. Oh no. And they're playing to his conscience. Aw. Anyway, we have the changing scene in the cages when they return Sawyer, and I love that they put this in there. He's watching Kate undress and his little heart monitor starts going off, and we realize that there is something in there and that if it does get up there, his heart is going to explode. And it's really funny to watch him pour a bucket of water on his head, which is great. This takes us to our flashback where Sawyer in the visit room sees the fugitive's wife try to get info on where the money is. You can tell that she's just trying to work the information out of him. And I love that he had it right from the start. And then as he's there, Cassidy shows up and we find out that's why he's been in prison the whole time, or why he's in prison at all. And she tells him that she had his kid and all she wants from him is for him to write her a letter. And I wonder if it's a letter specifically because the only letter that he's ever written is the one to Mr. Sawyer, the man that he plans to kill. So maybe it's a very intimate thing with the character of Sawyer. I wonder if it'll come up again, this idea of the letter outside of this, because now 2 instances for him are a coincidence, 3 times a pattern, as they say. And we see Sawyer not believing it, getting mad, and walks off. He's upset. He doesn't think that he could be a father, and you could see it really makes him really stressed out. This takes us back to the cages where Kate thinks she can climb out and sneak through the little bars, and he tells her to lay low, it's not the right time. And then we cut back to Jack, who's sitting in his room watching his cartoons, and he can hear the scratching of the noise of Sawyer and Kate in their cages. And in the midst of all of this, Juliet runs up and she needs his help. And she takes Jack to the OR, and Ben's in there and he's pissed. He doesn't want Jack to be there. And once Jack steps inside, it's like he didn't skip a beat. Goes right into doctor mode. Colleen's heart is going nuts. It's stopped. They're going crazy. They don't know what's going to happen. They need a crash cart, but they don't have one because they haven't needed one apparently in a long time, which is pretty good. And then they lose her. She dies, and it's pretty shocking, actually. Like, for the others, I mean, they're people that you don't know, but all of a sudden, the life of somebody has just ended, and it's kind of sad, and you can see that everybody in there is really distraught. Juliet is distraught. Tom is distraught, and so far, I don't know about you guys, but they've been seeming like kind of nicer people aside from Ben. Juliet and Tom especially, they seem like they're pretty nice, and Tom is kind of always joking with people. He's not really being mean to anyone, and neither is Juliet. It's just that one guy, Danny, who when he finds out that his wife has just died, takes it out on Sawyer right in front of Kate, making her admit to loving him, and that's the only way that he stops beating him, and he beats him bad. Really, really bad. So that leaves us into our next flashback where Sawyer is reading Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and there isn't a lot of reference here. I think if you believe there is, email me, wegobackpodcast@gmail.com, and tell me. I'll bring it up in the next episode. But I don't think that there's much other than there's a rabbit that dies. And there's like loose base things about working on the plantation or, working from farm to farm. And they've been working out in the fields with the mean boss man and Curly's wife. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like that's too much of a stretch, but it is lost and I've stretched further. So I'll be the first to admit it, but let me know. I want to see it. We see the fugitive who finds Sawyer and tells him that he was right, that he wants Sawyer to move his money, and Sawyer doesn't want to, but he also doesn't want that crooked warden to get the money, so he is going to find the money for him. This takes us back to the cages where Kate tries to climb out of her cage and escape, but Sawyer is telling her not to. She's scared though, not because of the fact that they're going to escape, but because she's scared about what he's lying about. And that has a very heavy meaning to it. And I love that they made her give that line that he's never really felt the need to lie to her about anything or seem as scared as he is about lying about something, but he doesn't want her to be implicated. He cares about her and she is recognizing that's why he's lying to her. So she won't leave him behind though. He tells her to leave. He says, it's every man for himself. We have to go. I'm not going to follow you. You got out of here. Get out. You can't get the cage open. And then she climbs back in her cage and he still bears the banner of every man for himself, but she says, live together, die alone as a response, which is a very obvious plug for Jack in this scene. And I think that this is also a good definition of both of these characters. Sawyer's initial motivation is to live a life of every man for himself, but Jack was always going to try to help everybody because he believes that it's live together, die alone. And we can see that in their motivations even since they got on the island. Jack tried to help everybody. Sawyer hoarded everything for himself. Or not hoarded, but just got all the supplies because he's got to take care of himself. So you can now have a great definition of the two, and we see that Kate is on the side of Jack in this. And that's a really fun thing to see them play back and forth. But we see that Ben is watching everything from his room, and Jack is left to sit in the body. I love this transition that we get to pass between the two scenes here while watching the overseer. That's a really awesome scene. There's a poster that they released at the time or a few years later on Damon Carlton and polarbear.com that I think had a print of him watching the screens, of Ben watching the screens. It was really cool. That site was awesome. That's where I got a really cool Smoke Monster shirt from. You guys should check it out. I think it's finally down, but it was really cool that it was up. It had a lot of really nice looking Lost related stuff. This was before they had a lot of like official, really cool looking stuff. So it was cool that they featured like really awesome pieces of art as merchandise for the show. It was really, really cool that Lost really took that to the next level for TV shows. Now it's a little too much, I think, but whatever. We got the Big Bang Theory everywhere. But we see Jack in the OR, who's still sitting next to the body. He doesn't give a fuck about Juliet's feelings when she asks him if he's just considering her feelings by telling her there was nothing more she could do and that Colleen was dead before she got on the table. He didn't give a fuck. He really didn't. And I loved the look on his face. Like, do you really think I fucking care? I think they probably wrote that in the script. I heard that when they wrote the script for Lost, I think Rocco might have said it once, that they didn't write in, censored words. They just wrote in the actual curse word and said, we'll fix it on the show. But because Jack is a very perceptive person, he knows why he's there. When he got brought into the OR, he saw those x-rays and he wants to know who he's here to save because he is a spinal surgeon and this guy needs a surgery. We go back to the beach where Desmond is setting up some sort of experiment in the middle of the sand, and this all happens right before torrential rainfall goes down and a giant lightning bolt hits right next to Charlie and Claire's camp. And that's pretty weird. What happened there? Desmond was trying to fix a roof. Now he's setting up an experiment, and then lightning hits really close to Claire and Charlie. We go back to the cages where Ben wants Sawyer for a walk. And this takes us to our flashback, the last one where Sawyer has been working with the warden the whole time. Oh my God, no! How could he? And he's been working with the FBI too. But he got the location of the money, and Sawyer has made a deal to get his sentence commuted. And he gets a commission of the money that's been embezzled, but he puts it in his daughter's name, Clementine Phillips, in the city that she lives in. And this is a great scene for Sawyer because it shows you his compassion. He has been hinting at compassion the whole time, struggling with shooting that guy, struggling with dealing with all the cons that he had to do that affected family. And we can see that he cares about his daughter. He knows he has a responsibility. And so he puts the money in his daughter's name. This is the first legit big score he's ever gotten. He can actually keep this money because it was taken from a criminal, which doesn't really make sense since that money was stolen to begin with. But he gives it away to be a good person. And as he's walking with Ben in the present time, he quotes of Mice and Men to him. And Ben confesses that this whole thing was a farce. That the pacemaker and everything was not real. That they needed to show him how serious they are. And that the only way to gain a con man's respect is to con him himself. And he shows the bunny to prove it. And then he gets socked in the face. But the real question I have to ask here is, did he seriously walk the whole way with that rabbit in his bag? And nobody else noticed that there was... Do rabbits just sit there and not move? I've never had a pet rabbit, but he just walked what seemed like quite a distance, like a pretty good hike, with a rabbit in his bag. Just want to point that out to you guys. It's really weird. But he's showing Sawyer that they are on a totally different island, and that even if they escape, they wouldn't be able to get back to where they're supposed to go. And he needs Sawyer to know that's why he can never try to escape. He's got nowhere to run. And then Ben quotes of Mice and Men to Sawyer in the exact same fashion. And we can see what kind of devil we're dealing with here. I don't know what else to call him, but he is certainly sinister in this scene and in this entire episode. This episode is probably one of my favorites in the entire series just because we get to see a lot about the character of Sawyer and who he was before. And working with the government, again, that's like against, I would assume, con man's code, or at least TV. I don't know what con man's code is. What am I talking about? But you get to see that he's more compassionate than most other people, and he's definitely not a criminal. He's just kind of a creature of circumstance. I think that's what they're showing here, because when he's given the opportunity, he does what's right. And that is a big deal. So, guys, really appreciate your input and your emails this week. I love to see them. Email me at wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. I'll be happy to read your emails, correspond with you guys, and always talk about it. You can follow me at King Lord Bryan on Twitter, and we'll be happy to keep you updated on what's going on with this show. And next week, we'll be back reviewing The Cost of Living, and I Do. But until then, you folks have a great time, and I will see you again soon.